Minister Justin Trudeau today said that Donald Trump is trying to cripple the Canadian economy in order to annex it. What do you say to that?
Justin Trudeau is running the end of his term, and I don't really want to think about the ridiculous things he's said in the last couple of days. It's sad. It's time for him to go, and let's move on and have a new government in Canada.
Folks, yesterday was absolutely crazy. The amount of press conferences and interviews that were being done, regardless if it was the premiers or the federal leaders, it was just non-stop. It seemed like anybody and everybody could express how they felt about the tariffs, which seemed very similar. Everybody just basically said, tariffs bad, we fight back, rah, 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 stick together. And obviously the premiers are quite upset and angry that Trump put the tariffs going forward. But even the federal leaders, like I said, a lot of them had the exact same message. Some slight differences. Pierre, he agrees with the retaliatory tariffs, but he doesn't want to see any of the money going to the government. It should be basically saved for the people who are going to be most affected.
Counter tariffs must not be a cash cow for the government. Almost every penny of the tariffs collected should go to tax cuts, with a small sum set aside for targeted relief to workers hardest hit by the trade war. None of the money should go to new government spending and programs. We must not allow politicians to dishonestly use this crisis to once again launch a debt-fueled, money-printing spending spree that will drive up inflation and further destroy the working class and hit the poorest people the hardest.
Then we have Jagmeet basically saying the same thing, but adding the caveat that we should stick together even if it means delaying the election.
We saw in the pandemic that we understood the severity of the situation required us to come together, to pass legislation, to be able to support Canadians. This is worse than the pandemic. The potential ramifications of this trade war could have devastating impacts on our economy worse than what we saw during that period of time. And so we absolutely need to have the ability to come back to Parliament to get things done. And what I'm saying is I want supports of workers done first. An election is secondary to that. First, let's get the support in place for those workers. Let's make sure they get the help that they need. People are already losing their jobs, and then we can worry about an election after that.
Now, I'm not even really surprised at the things that Jagmeet says anymore, but by far the worst response was from Trudeau, as he decided to take a page out of Chrystia Freeland's book and go down the route of insulting Trump, calling him dumb by saying the Wall Street Journal said his actions were dumb. And even the American media picked up on this and reported on it. Take a look.
Well, it's been quite a morning. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is taking shots at President Trump in a rather personal way. This is over the newly implemented 25% tariffs that went into effect. Now, a short time ago, watch this closely, Trudeau had a direct message. He even called the president Donald.
I want to speak directly to one specific American, Donald. In the over 8 years you and I have worked together, we've done big things. We signed a historic deal that has created record jobs and growth in both of our countries. We've done big things together on the world stage, as Canada and the US have done together for decades, for generations. And now we should be working together to ensure even greater prosperity for North Americans in a very uncertain and challenging world. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do. We two friends fighting is exactly what our opponents around the world want to see.
Now, I don't know what's this tough guy bravado that Justin's trying to display here, but the way he said Donald, staring into the camera the way he was, hunched over the podium with both hands up there, like even the American media said Trudeau should probably think twice about trying to pick a fight with Donald, because If he looks at his buddy who tried this a few days ago, Vladimir Zelensky, there were severe repercussions with that, and now Vladimir has basically walked it back and given essentially an apology letter. Take a look.
Now, here's what makes this interesting. The comments you just heard come about 72 hours plus after another foreign leader tried the same strategy, picking a fight with President Trump, the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world. We saw Zelensky of Ukraine take on the same kind of confrontational attitude. And interestingly, this same hour, as one leader stood up to pick a fight, another backed down. Zelensky posted this. Check this out. He said, "I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace. None of us want an endless war. Ukraine's ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer." This is the interesting part. Our meeting in Washington at the White House on Friday did not go the way it was supposed to be. It is regrettable that it happened this way. It is time to make things right.
Now, I don't really want to rehash what happened in the Oval Office. I already did a video on that. But I do find it interesting that after this spat, Zelensky quickly ran over to Europe to try to get more support. Trudeau followed right behind him. They agreed they'll give him more support, but that ultimately they still need the U.S. for this. Yet even after this realization, he doesn't even try to mend anything, it seems, till Trump decides to halt the military aid to the Ukraine. Now his tune has changed. Well, this tough guy act by Trudeau happened, and then Trump quickly tweeted this right after.
Megan, we've heard from Donald Trump. Tell us more about what he and his administration are saying right now.
Well, Andrew, we haven't seen Donald Trump on camera anywhere today, but he has been busy writing on his social media platform, Truth Social. So let's take a look at what he's saying, particularly in response to Canada's response in terms of the retaliatory tariffs that Canada plans to impose. Trump writing, "Please explain to Governor Trudeau of Canada that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount."
I gotta say, that is quite the response. However, these reciprocal tariffs aren't the ones that come in until April 2nd following the April 1st report. We also have the March 12th anticipated tariffs from the steel and aluminum that they've announced. But Howard Lutnick, the new Secretary of Commerce, actually said that the tariffs that they just imposed yesterday might actually decrease a little bit today, depending on their review of what the Canadian government has proposed to them as of yesterday. Take a look.
Secretary Lutnick, I'm a reporter from Canada. I'm curious, is there room for the tariff rate against Canada to drop?
I think there's going to be a discussion. Canada has offered us an enormous amount, again, to do better. And I think we're talking to the president, and I think there's some room, but we'll decide tomorrow. We're looking at all the offers that they've made. And I think there'll be room tomorrow, and we'll announce that tomorrow.
Now, I'm glad to hear that they are still in communications. They're still open to talking about this tariff situation. But the fact of the matter is, tariffs are here, regardless if we like it or not. And we should actually be focusing the conversation on moving forward coming the next week, if not months, if not years. And this is actually something that Kate Harrison brought up when she was on the CBC panel last night. And this is what she had to say.
I mean, what is your sense of what it is the president is doing here?
Yeah, I think we could spend a lot of time psychoanalyzing Donald Trump's motives.
We sure could, yeah. It's a 2-hour show, though.
But I think the response, indeed, I think the response today is the right one. We need to hit back. We need to have retaliatory measures. I thought the government did a good job with that and in making that clear. And I think that there's some political consensus as well that today is the moment for that. You see your premiers ripping up contracts, et cetera. I think attention should quickly turn to what the plan is for tomorrow and the day after that.
Well, Howard Lutnick said they might meet in the middle tomorrow. I mean, who knows what that means?
Perhaps,
you know?
perhaps
right?
the plan for next week then.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is there are systemic things that need to change about Canada's economy and how we do business, how workers are paid, how companies are taxed, and how we position ourselves to be open for investment. today is the day to be very frustrated and upset and have these retaliatory measures. I think Canadians are quickly going to be asking, okay, well, what's the plan to make Canada more resilient? And we're going to move away from the immediacy of this moment into what's the plan for the future. And that's going to force the government to take a hard look at a lot of the things they've championed for a long time, including the carbon tax, including the slow pace of housing growth in Canada. So there's things that will need to be looked at that will draw some attention, I think, to some vulnerabilities that have been created through current government policy. I think Canadians are going to be very much looking to that once the immediacy of today has worn.
Yeah, these are a lot of things we need to look at as a country, regardless of tariff threats, really, but certainly the urgency is magnified.
Now, I obviously agree with this, but there seems to be a bit of a fracture when it comes to the premiers and how them being all on the same page. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of them were on American media yesterday, as well as some on the day before. They're all very upset, very angry with Trump, but different responses. You had Doug Ford going on American TV saying he's willing to cut off the power to some certain states, where on the other hand, you have Danielle Smith saying that is never an option for them. They're never going to have that on the table.
Yesterday, we heard from Doug Ford of Ontario with this threat about raising taxes, let's say, on electricity that is shipped to the U.S. Today, the Journal headline lays out exactly that. Are there varying levels of appetite to retaliate within some of the premiers in Canada?
I've already said that we're not going to retaliate on energy. That is such an essential product for American consumers and American businesses. We want to make sure that we've got some, 4.3 million barrels a day going into the United States. We want to make sure that flow continues, albeit it's going to be a little bit more expensive because of the 10% tariffs. But I would say that we would rather be talking about ways in which we can remove tariffs altogether.
How bad is it going to be for Alberta economically?
I must say, I've talked about the 10% tariff with our producers and those who sell the goods, and then everyone's going to take a little bit of a bite on that. Our producers are, the refiners in the United States are going to have higher costs. American consumers are going to have a higher cost. You're going to see it, the price at the pump, more so in the areas where refineries are 100% reliant on Canadian oil. So it's, and as you know, if you increase the cost of energy, you increase the cost of everything. So it's going to have an inflationary effect in the U.S. We're already seeing the effect on the stock market today. Investors don't like the decisions that have been made today. And the best move would be to try to de-escalate as quickly as possible. Let's get down to talking about what the real issues are, as opposed to a pretext, and then solve those irritants so that we can get on with having the best tariff-free relationship that I think any two nations have in the world.
Now, Danielle Smith does bring up a good point about the stock market, and with Trump being a businessman, I think he kind of looks at the stocks and how they're reacting to his decisions. So this might be another reason where Howard Lutnick said that they're going to be potentially changing or adjusting some of the tariff values. Maybe because they see how bad the stock market's been hit or is dropped, they're going to try to level it back out. Who really knows? But Danielle Smith was then asked if she thinks that this is still about fentanyl, and just listen to her response.
Premier, do you think this is truly about fentanyl?
I think it was, but I think we've demonstrated. I have to tell you, when I'm looking at the bus that we have at the border, it's cocaine and crystal meth coming up from America. So these are issues that are two-way issues. America has cartels and organized crime that are causing problems for us. And we recognize that it is a two-way street. They should too. We want to be able to address those issues collaboratively, share the intelligence, but to act as if this is only a one-way problem. Remember, there's a lot of distance between Canada and Mexico. There's a big country in the middle, and so we are not the root of a lot of the problems. We in fact are having some spillover effect of those problems, as we've noticed as we've started doing a lot more work and stoppages at the borders. You're going to see more of that now that we found so many drugs coming up from the United States. We're going to have to do more stops of American trucks coming across the border so that we can stop that too. We're doing our part to be able to bust the fentanyl operations that are happening in our country as well. But I think that this is a problem we should be working on collectively rather than pointing fingers suggesting it's just a one-way street. It's not.
Now, this is something that I've mentioned before in terms of looking at the border as a fence between two neighbors. If my side has a hole and my dog is running into your backyard, or your side has a hole and your dog is running into my backyard, Regardless of where the hole is, we should be working on patching up that hole so we don't have this dog, quote unquote, running back and forth. You don't have to blame me. I don't have to blame you. We work on the problem together. Simple as that. However, now we have individuals like Justin Trudeau or Chrystia Freeland or even Doug Ford throwing a potential bigger wrench into this relationship with Trump, because now they're throwing out the rhetoric that Trump is trying to appease and cozy up to Vladimir Putin.
The United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense.
To ship uranium anywhere, everyone wants his uranium. Ship it out other places, because the only other place they can get uranium is in Russia. And I see President Trump cozying up to Putin. What a disaster that is. He attacks his closest friends and neighbors, stood shoulder to shoulder with them in wars and other crises. And who does he cozy up to? But Putin. You got to be kidding me.
Now, if you were able to rub two brain cells together, you could understand that the reason that Trump is dealing with Putin is because he wants to put an end to this war between Ukraine and Russia. He was very open about that. He's talked about it multiple times. And even J.D. Vance went on Sean Hannity's show days after, or the next day after that whole blow up in the Oval Office, and this is what he said.
People all over the world, when you talk to leaders in private, whether they're Ukrainian or European, when you talk to people in private, they will tell you this cannot go on forever. There aren't enough Ukrainian lives, there isn't enough American money, and there isn't enough ammunition to fund this thing indefinitely. The only realistic pathway to bringing this thing to a settlement is President Trump's pathway. We encourage both President Zelensky and President Putin to follow that path.
Well, I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent. And this came up in the discussion Friday. The Biden administration called Putin every name in the book, and they've been trying to get the president.
And he still invaded anyway.
Okay, he still invaded anyway. Well, remember, it depends if it's a minor incursion. Let's go back to that moment, which I thought as troops were amassing on the border. Yep. But I go back and I think about this. And Biden spent all of this money, called Putin, all of these names. The media and the Democrats, they want Donald Trump to call him names. And the president addressed that.
Thing.
And then he's supposed to call him and say, Vladimir, you ready to talk a peace now? Yeah. That's not going to work.
No, it's diplomacy 101, right? Is you have to have a reasonable relationship with somebody to be able to even start the conversation. We have to remember, Sean, Ukraine, half of the country, a third of the country is totally destroyed. The economy is depressed. You've got hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians. Of course, a lot of dead Russians as well. The president wants to negotiate a settlement. How can you negotiate if you can't even talk to somebody? And that's what he said. He's not saying, like, nobody's suggesting, as Secretary Rubio said, no one is suggesting that we give the Nobel Peace Prize to Vladimir Putin. What we're saying is it's important for President Trump to be able to have a conversation. That's not well served by standing up at a press conference and calling the guy every negative name in the book. By the way, as we just said, President Biden called Putin every single name in the book. What did it lead to? It led to war, it led to destruction, it led to conflict. President Trump is trying to bring this thing to a close. You got to be able to talk to somebody to do that.
So my question to you, is he wrong? Let me know in the comment section below. What do you think about all this? And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.